A quiet yard can look finished and still feel strangely empty.
The grass is cut, the beds are edged, the mulch is fresh, the patio furniture is in place, and yet the space has no movement, no low hum in the herbs, no small shadows moving through the flowers, no tomatoes setting heavily on the vine. The missing piece is often smaller than a coin and easy to overlook. Bees do more than visit a garden. They reveal whether the garden is alive in the deeper sense, whether it offers food, shelter, safety, and continuity across the season. In the United States alone, there are roughly 4,000 native bee species, ranging from tiny solitary bees to large carpenter bees, and many of them can show up in ordinary residential landscapes when the yard gives them a real reason to stay. The first mistake many homeowners make is treating bees as guests who can be invited with one pretty flower bed. Bees read a yard more honestly than people do. They are looking for energy, and that energy comes from nectar. They are looking for protein, and that comes from pollen. They're also looking for a safe place to travel, rest, nest, and return tomorrow. A garden that blooms hard for 2 weeks in May and then goes quiet becomes a short-lived restaurant on a long road. The bees arrive, take what they can, and move on. A garden that feeds them from early spring into late fall becomes part of their route, and over time it becomes part of the local rhythm of pollination. The USDA Forest Service recommends using a wide variety of plants that bloom from early spring into late fall and planting them in clumps so pollinators can find and use them more easily. That one idea changes the whole design of a yard. Instead of thinking only about color from the sidewalk, the better question is what is blooming when the bees need it most. In early spring, when the air is still cool and many gardens look bare, flowering trees and shrubs can matter more than a flat of annuals. Redbud, serviceberry, willow, maple, fruit trees, blueberries, native viburnums, and other regionally appropriate woody plants can feed pollinators before the summer show begins. Later, the garden can pass the work to herbs, perennials, vegetables allowed to flower, native wildflowers, and late-season plants such as asters and goldenrods. When a yard has a beginning, a middle, and an end to its bloom season, bees stop encountering isolated decorations and start encountering a landscape that behaves like habitat. The shape of the flowers matters as much as the calendar. A bumblebee can work flowers that a tiny sweat bee may never reach. A small native bee may prefer open, shallow blossoms where the pollen is easy to access. Some highly bred ornamentals look impressive to human eyes while offering little useful pollen or nectar, especially double flowers with crowded petals that make the center difficult to reach. The best garden has different flower shapes, heights, colors, and bloom times because different bees have different bodies and feeding habits. USDA guidance points gardeners toward diversity in flower size, shape, color, height, and growth habit, including native species, heirloom plants, and herbs such as rosemary, oregano, basil, marjoram, borage. A bee-friendly yard often begins with restraint. Let some herbs flower. Let a few greens bolt. Let basil, cilantro, dill, fennel, thyme, oregano, sage, mint in a controlled container, and chives send up blossoms. In a vegetable garden, those flowers can turn a purely productive bed into a living corridor. The gardener sees a plant that is past its kitchen prime. A bee sees a late meal. This is where a practical garden becomes more generous without becoming messy. A row of flowering herbs near tomatoes, peppers, squash, cucumbers, beans, and fruiting plants brings the sound of work into the beds. The bees collect what they need, and the garden receives more consistent pollination in return. The lawn deserves a second look as well. For decades, the American lawn was sold as a sign of order. Thick turf, one species, no flowers, no clover, no visible insect life. That look came with a cost. It often required fertilizer, herbicides, irrigation, and repeated mowing, while offering bees almost nothing. A bee lawn takes a different approach. It keeps the yard usable while allowing low-growing flowers to share space with turf grass. The University of Minnesota describes bee lawns as turf grass mixed with flowers that provide nectar and pollen, managed with lower inputs and generally less fertilizer and pesticide. Their guidance also notes that bee lawns can attract more than 50 species of native bees.
This does not require turning the entire property into a meadow. A strip along the fence, a sunny corner near the vegetable beds, the edge of a fruit tree, or the area around a fruit tree can become the first invitation. Start where success is likely. Bees prefer sun because many of them are more active in warm, bright areas. A small, sunny planting with repeated clusters of the same flower usually performs better than one lonely specimen of everything at the garden center. Clumps create visual and sense signals that are easier for pollinators to detect. They also let bees work efficiently, moving from bloom to bloom without wasting energy. A garden with drifts of flowers looks calmer to people and clearer to bees. Native plants deserve special attention because native bees and native plants share long local histories. This does not mean every non-native plant has to disappear. Many familiar herbs and some old-fashioned flowers can be useful. Still, locally native plants often support a wider web of life, including specialist bees that evolved around particular plant families. In many yards, the most powerful choice is a blended one. Keep the beloved rosemary near the kitchen door. Keep the lavender if it thrives in the climate. Keep the zinnias if they are single-flowered and busy with visitors. Then build the permanent backbone with native perennials, shrubs, and trees suited to the soil, rainfall, and winter conditions of the region. Xerces Society guidance for pollinator gardens emphasizes native plants adapted to local conditions and free from harmful pesticides. Buying the plant is where many good intentions can quietly fail. A flower labeled pollinator-friendly can still arrive with a chemical history. Some nursery plants are treated before they ever reach the cart. The concern is strongest with systemic insecticides because these can move through plant tissues and reach the parts of the plant bees visit. UMass Extension explains that neonicotinoids are usually systemic and can be absorbed by roots, moving through the plant into pollen and nectar. Xerces advises buying bee-safe plants, meaning plants free from pesticides harmful to bees and other pollinators. That turns a simple shopping trip into a small act of due diligence. Ask the nursery whether the plants were grown without neonicotinoids or other bee-harmful pesticides. Choose local native plant nurseries when possible, because they are often more familiar with pollinator-safe growing practices and regional plant choices. Avoid impulse buying only because a plant is in full bloom. A yard designed for bees is planned across months, so a plant that looks modest today may be more valuable than a showy pot that peaks and fades before summer settles in. The best purchase is often the one that fills a gap in the bloom calendar. Pesticides are where the garden's promise can collapse. A homeowner may plant flowers for bees in the morning and spray aphids in the evening, never realizing both decisions are connected. Many pest problems in home landscapes are cosmetic or temporary. A few chewed leaves do not mean the garden is failing. They often mean the garden has entered the food web. University of Minnesota Extension notes that many yard and garden pests can be controlled without pesticides, and many insects and diseases in landscapes cause only cosmetic problems that do not require treatment. A more mature garden tolerates some imperfection. It uses water pressure, hand removal, pruning, row covers, healthier soil, plant spacing, and patience before reaching for a spray. When treatment becomes unavoidable, the decision should be precise. Avoid spraying open flowers. Avoid windy days that cause drift. Avoid broad-spectrum insecticides that turn a small pest problem into a wider ecological reset. The point is to stop treating every insect as an enemy. A yard that supports bees will also attract predatory wasps, hoverflies, lady beetles, lacewings, birds, spiders, and other beneficial life. The longer the system has to settle, the more help arrives without being ordered from a shelf.
Food is only half the story. A yard can be full of flowers and still fail to support bees if there is nowhere to nest. This is one of the most overlooked facts in home gardening. Many people picture bees living in hives, yet most native bees are solitary. They do not have a queen, a colony, or a honey-filled box in the backyard. A female bee may build her own nest, provision it with pollen and nectar, lay eggs, and seal the chambers for the next generation. Xerxes states that about 70% of native bees nest in the ground, where they create burrows in soil, while others use dead wood, hollow stems, cavities, rock walls, and similar spaces. This changes what clean means outdoors. A perfectly mulched, heavily tilled, constantly disturbed yard can erase nesting opportunities. Ground nesting bees need patches of accessible soil, often sunny and well-drained. They are rarely interested in attacking anyone. Many are small, solitary, and focused on their work. Leaving a few bare soil patches near plantings can help. So can avoiding landscape fabric across every bed, reducing unnecessary tilling, and keeping some areas undisturbed through the season. The cleanest-looking yard may be the least useful. A slightly more textured yard, managed with intention, often holds far more life. Stem nesting bees need a different kind of generosity. Hollow or pithy stems from plants such as coneflower, bee balm, raspberry, elderberry, joe pye weed, and many native perennials can become nesting sites when left standing. The common habit of cutting every stem to the ground in fall removes future homes. A better approach is selective cleanup. Leave some stems through winter and into spring. Cut others at varying heights rather than shaving the whole bed flat. Place pruned stems loosely in a dry, sheltered corner instead of sending them all away in yard waste bags. The garden may look quieter in winter, but inside those stems, next season may already be waiting. Water helps as well, though it must be offered carefully. Bees can drown in deep bowls and bird baths with slick sides. A shallow dish with stones, marbles, gravel, or floating cork gives them landing places. The goal is damp access, not an open pool. Refresh it often so it does not become a mosquito nursery. In hot, dry periods, a reliable water source can make a yard more useful to bees and other beneficial insects. Penn State Extension includes water among the basic supports in a pollinator-friendly garden, along with season-long food and reduced pesticide pressure. The layout of the yard should also protect bees from unnecessary stress. Place flower beds away from areas where children and pets run constantly, and away from doors where nervous people may swat at every visitor. Give the busiest plantings a little distance from grills, walkways, and high-traffic patios. Bees are usually uninterested in people when people are calm and do not trap or strike them. Most garden visits are quiet. A bee lands, feeds, moves, and leaves. Problems tend to come from fear, sudden movement, or placing flowers directly where people brush against them all day. A thoughtful layout lets the garden feel alive without making the household uncomfortable. There is also a difference between attracting bees and creating a hazard. Leaving sugary drinks open, letting garbage overflow, or placing syrup outside can draw the wrong kind of attention, including yellow jackets, which are wasps and behave differently from flower-foraging bees. The goal is flowers, habitat, and clean water. It is not bait. Honey, sugar water, and fruit scraps can create crowding, disease risk, and conflict near people. A good bee garden works because it resembles a healthy landscape, not because it lures insects into an artificial feeding station. Color can help, but it should never become the whole strategy. Bees are often drawn to blues, purples, yellows, whites, and ultraviolet patterns people cannot see. Yet a yard designed only by color misses the deeper requirement. A purple flower with no accessible nectar is less useful than a modest native bloom alive with movement. Watch the garden like a field researcher for a few minutes each week.
Notice which flowers receive visitors and which remain decorative silence. Notice whether the garden goes empty after spring bulbs fade. Notice whether the herbs attract more bees than the expensive ornamentals. The bees will tell the truth about the planting plan.
For a flower-filled yard, the sequence could unfold in layers. Early in the year, flowering shrubs and trees carry the first wave. As spring warms, native perennials, clover, herbs, and fruit blossoms begin to take over. In summer, coneflowers, bee balm, mountain mint, sunflowers, milkweed, blanket flower, anise hyssop, black-eyed Susans, salvia, and regionally appropriate wildflowers keep the activity visible. In late season, asters, goldenrods, sedums, and other fall bloomers become vital because they feed bees preparing for winter or raising the last generation of the year. The exact plant list should change by region because a dry western yard, a humid southern garden, a midwestern lot, and a New England border do not all need the same plants. The real transformation happens when the gardener stops buying plants as isolated objects and starts building a continuous menu. A garden center display is designed to sell what looks good today. A bee garden is designed around what will be needed in 6 weeks, 3 months, and next year. That means repeating dependable plants, choosing species with overlapping bloom windows, and accepting that some of the most valuable plants may look plain when purchased. It also means using shrubs and trees as part of the pollinator plan. University of Minnesota Extension points out that annuals and perennials are popular for attracting pollinators, while many trees, shrubs, and vines also provide food and habitat for beneficial insects and birds. In a small yard, every square foot has to work harder. Containers can help when soil is poor or space is limited. A sunny patio can hold pots of borage, thyme, oregano, basil, salvia, native annuals, dwarf sunflowers, and compact flowering perennials. Window boxes can serve smaller bees when planted with accessible flowers. Raised beds can combine vegetables with pollinator strips. Even a narrow side yard can become a corridor if it has sun, bloom succession, and fewer chemicals. Urban research has found that residential gardens can provide floral and nesting resources for bee diversity, especially when habitat gardening uses targeted ornamental plants that offer clear pollination benefits. Patience matters because bees need time to find a new resource. The first season may bring a few visitors. The second season often brings more, especially as perennials mature and nesting conditions stabilize. By the third season, the yard can feel noticeably different. The sound changes. The vegetable garden sets fruit more confidently. The flower beds seem less like decoration and more like a working landscape. You may begin to recognize patterns. Bumblebees working one plant in the morning. Tiny metallic bees flashing across another. Carpenter bees patrolling a sunny edge. Sweat bees appearing near open-faced flowers. The garden becomes less anonymous. There is a quiet discipline to this kind of yard. It asks the gardener to do some things and to stop doing others. Plant more of what feeds life. Spray less. Mow differently. Leave some stems. Leave some leaves where they can serve as shelter. Keep a patch of soil open. Replace a weak ornamental with a stronger native shrub. Ask harder questions before buying plants. Let the herbs flower. Accept a few ragged leaves. Look closely before deciding something is a problem. Xerces describes high-quality pollinator habitat as a combination of abundant flowers, shelter, nesting sites, and protection from pesticides, which means beauty and function have to grow together. A yard full of bees is not a yard out of control. It is a yard with relationships restored. The flowers are no longer just color around the house. They are signals, meals, landmarks, nurseries, and seasonal promises. The gardener gains more blooms, stronger harvests, and a landscape that feels awake.
The bees gain a chain of resources in a world where many lawns, parking lots, and sterile beds offer them almost nothing. The work starts with a few thoughtful choices, then deepens season after season. Plan for the whole year, buy clean plants, grow in clusters, protect nesting places, put away the spray unless there's a real reason, give the yard enough life, and the bees will usually find their way in. Whether your garden is a small corner by the patio or a wide yard full of beds, trees, and vegetable rows, the same truth applies. A healthier garden begins when you understand the insects living in it. Some insects pollinate, some protect your plants, others can damage leaves, roots, flowers, and fruit if they're ignored for too long. The more you learn to recognize the difference, the better your garden becomes. So for more practical tips on beneficial insects, garden pests, and safer ways to manage unwanted invaders, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll keep helping you build a yard that is more beautiful, more productive, and easier to protect season after season.